call came at 9:47 in the morning. A reasonably skilled 34-year-old named Dara was halfway through her second espresso when the phone lit up with the name of her largest client. Her shoulders rose before her thumb touched the screen. She had spent 4 months on a proposal that client had already greenlit, and the work was supposed to be paying her rent through the end of the calendar year. Within the first 9 seconds of the call, she could hear the man's tone relax into the cadence of someone delivering a sentence he had rehearsed. Dara knew what was coming before the words landed. Her stomach tightened, her jaw set, and her first thought was already running the size 6 shoebox of imagined consequences. She was going to have to call her mother. She was going to have to redo the deck. She was going to have to explain on a Wednesday afternoon why an adult woman who had been doing this for a decade had just lost a fifth of her annual revenue. The call lasted 3 minutes. The bad news was real. The imagined consequences had already done most of the damage before the second minute was over. That is the thing about pressure that nobody warns you about. It does not arrive first as an event. It arrives as the elaborate scene your mind begins constructing around the event, while the event itself is still talking. The phone is still ringing. The doctor has not yet said the second sentence. The deadline has not yet been moved, but the pressure already owns the inside of your skull, and the structure of the room inside your skull is now mostly furnished. Now here is what you can do about it. The classical Stoics of imperial Rome. Epictetus, the freed slave who taught that impressions are the first material of either wisdom or catastrophe. Seneca, the wealthy senator who wrote 91 letters to a friend on how to keep his mind intact under load. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who on military campaign wrote a notebook to himself with the working title of To Himself in Greek. They spent their working lives on exactly this problem. They did not write romantic pep talks. They wrote about pressure, the way a structural engineer writes about a load-bearing wall, where the weight is what the wall is made of, where the wall will fail if you do not reinforce it. This video is built from the bones of what they actually wrote. I have checked the references. The architecture is theirs, the framing is mine, the metaphor system is mine, and the organizing principle is one that almost nobody uses when they talk about Stoicism: under pressure. Pressure is not a single event. Pressure is a cycle. It has a beginning, a middle, an end, and a residue. If you meet it as a single event, it will knock you down by surprise. If you meet it as a cycle, you will know what part of it you are in at any given moment, and you'll know which move is appropriate for that moment. There are 4 states. Inside those 4 states, there are 4 levers you can build once and use across your entire life. We're going to go through all of them. The first clue: the cycle begins before you think it begins. State 1, the knock. The Stoics described this state with very precise language. They called it fantasia. The first impression, the unfiltered appearance of an event to the mind. In modern cognitive science, this is the moment the amygdala flags something as salient before the prefrontal cortex has finished parsing it. The same shape, the same timing. The Stoics figured it out in a marketplace in Nicopolis 2,000 years ago. Neuroscientists confirmed it in a scanner in the 1990s. Both traditions agree on what to do. What they agree on: do not trust the first impression as a verdict. The first impression is information. It is not yet knowledge. It is not yet judgment. It is the raw material of a judgment. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, used a phrase the Romans liked: imago, the image. He wrote that he was not disturbed by events themselves, but by the images that preceded them. The image of losing your job is louder than the sentence of losing your job, because the image has been circulating in your head for weeks, and the sentence only landed an hour ago. Modern cognitive therapists call this anticipatory stress and treat it in much the same way. You cannot stop the image from arriving, but you can refuse to treat the image as the event. What does refusal look like in practice? The first move is the breath, not because breath is magical, because breath is the cheapest, fastest tool you have for reinserting a small interval between the stimulus and your response. The breath does not change what happened. The breath changes what happens inside your body in the next second. And in that second, the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and the amygdala is no longer the only voice in the room. The second move is the name. You name what just arrived, in plain language, without ornament. Not everything is collapsing. Not this is the worst thing that has ever happened. Just the client ended the contract. Or the biopsy result is delayed a week. Or my daughter didn't answer when I called. The sentence you produce when you name an event should be short, factual, and slightly boring. If it isn't boring, your amygdala is still doing the writing. The third move is the pause. You give yourself the same 10 seconds the competitor talked about, but for a different reason. Not to escape the moment, but to make sure the moment is actually finished before you begin responding to it. Sometimes a knock is a knock. Sometimes a knock is a mistake. Sometimes a knock is actually the opening of the wrong conversation entirely. The pause lets the second sentence of the conversation arrive before you commit to the first sentence of your response. This is fantasia handled in the Stoic way. The impression arrives, the judgment is suspended. The breath does its small mechanical work. The name takes the shadow off the size of the thing. The pause lets the moment complete itself. And in that 30-second interval, you have replaced reactivity with regulation. This is the first state mastered. Escalation. What happens when the mind starts irrigating the fire? State 2. The loop. You named the event. So far, so good. You did the breath. You paused. And now the second state begins. And if you had not seen it coming, it will bury you. The loop is the part of the cycle in which your mind stops being a witness to the event and becomes an author of the event. The knock was real. The pause was real. And now, alone in your kitchen with the phone face down on the counter, you start to fill in what hasn't happened yet. Dara, the woman from the opening, went through this loop in roughly 90 seconds. By the end of it, she had called her mother, rehearsed a difficult conversation with her landlord, imagined what she would say to the next client if the next one cancelled, written a resignation letter in her head to a job she hadn't even lost yet, and begun a financial projection that assumed every other piece of her income would fail in the same month. None of those things happened. None of them were likely to happen. But each one had produced a small physical payment in her body, a sigh, a shoulder lift, a jaw clench, as if it were already happening. She was burning the candle of her attention on the entire holiday at once. Seneca in Moral Letters to Lucilius put his finger directly on this. He wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that we pay emotional interest on debts that haven't come due. The Stoic word for this was prolepsis, the anticipation of a future constructed by the present mind. The modern psychological term is catastrophizing, and Aaron Beck named it in the cognitive therapy literature in the 1970s. Both traditions describe the same tax you pay for being alive inside your own imagination. The corrective is not think positively. Positive thinking on top of a catastrophizing habit is the emotional equivalent of painting a cracked wall. The corrective is separation. You take the loop apart into 3 components: what happened, what I'm imagining, what I can actually do. Most of the thought stream you've been treating as a single catastrophe is 2/3 imagination and 1/13 action. Let me give you a usable sentence. When you notice your mind is in a loop, you say out loud in the room, in front of whoever is in the room, including yourself, what has actually happened? What am I only predicting? And what is the next thing I can do before lunch? That single sentence takes the loop apart. It returns your attention to the present. Marcus Aurelius kept writing a version of this to himself in the Meditations, and it gives your body a small executable task. The loop loses most of its power because the loop can't survive a literal, actionable sentence. The imagination needs ambiguity to keep itself alive. The moment you sharpen the sentence, the imagination has to give back the chair. The more time you spend inside a loop, the more plastic your body becomes to living in loops. This is the genuine danger of prolepsis. It is self-training. Every loop you don't interrupt teaches the next loop to come faster and last longer. The 4 minutes you spent in the loop this morning are how you teach your nervous system to spend 40 minutes in the loop the next time. This is why the loop is the state in which most of the chronic pressure-related damage gets done. It isn't the big events that destroy composure, it's the loops that run after the events. And if you do only one thing with the rest of this video, interrupt the loop a 5th time this week than you interrupted it last week. That single ratio is the entire Stoic discipline of attention visible in daily life. The first turn, regulation before straighten spore. Now you have arrived at the state where the pressure is real, the loop has been interrupted, and you are standing in front of the actual thing with your feet roughly under you. This is the state of composure under load, the place where Stoic practice either becomes visible or fails. The hold has 2 distinct failure modes, and both deserve their own names. Failure mode 1 is detonation. You feel the pressure, you feel the urgency, and you answer both at full volume. Every message gets a reply, every conversation gets escalated, every decision gets accelerated. Detonation is the discharge of pressure into action, and it feels productive because the output rate is high. But the rate is high because accuracy is low. Detonation in the body creates movements that interfere with the parts of your nervous system responsible for precise, sequential work. Failure mode 2 is dissociation. The pressure arrives and you refuse to participate in it. You go calm in the wrong way. Not the trained calm of a navigator who has read the storm, but the faked calm of someone who is going to find out 3 weeks later what the pressure was actually asking of them. Dissociation looks like composure from the outside. From the inside, it looks like a clock that has stopped ticking. Neither of those is the hold. The hold is the active state of operating under load without becoming the load. It's what Marcus Aurelius meant repeatedly when he wrote to himself about returning to the present task rather than to the future, the past, or the imagined outcome. The relevant passage in Meditations, most scholars located in Book 7, describes a trained mind that does the work in front of it with its full attention, not because the work is pleasant, but because the work is the work. Try this exercise in your own kitchen. Set a timer for 3 minutes. Pick an annoying administrative task you have been postponing. Do it with full attention for the 3 minutes. Not faster, not slower, not with the radio louder to distract you, not with the phone face down because you don't trust yourself. Just do the task at the speed the task actually requires and end at the timer. That's small-scale training for the state 3 you will eventually face on a larger scale. The physical component of the hold matters as much as the cognitive one. The breath keeps doing its work. The shoulders stay down. The jaw stays unhinged. The eyes stay where they are. Your body is not a quiet companion under pressure. Your body is the instrument you play under pressure, and an instrument that hasn't been held is going to make noise whether you want it to or not. The hold is also where the difference between pressure and suffering becomes your clearest daily choice. Both feel the same in the first 90 seconds. They diverge later. Pressure is the load. Suffering is the load, plus the stories you have told yourself about the load. The Stoic practice is the practice of choosing the load and declining the stories, not because the stories don't matter, but because you are the author of the stories. And an author who has let the stories write the next chapter is no longer the author. So far, the hold has given you 4 pieces: a trained, simple physical posture, a small executable task in front of you, an understanding that the load is the load and the stories are the stories, and a present task worth doing your full attention. The S can turn. What pressure writers into you state 4? The inheritance. The pressure has passed. The client meeting is over. The deadline is met. The result came back. The conversation ended. The state of pressure is gone. What remains is what's been written. There are two species of residue, and you must learn to recognize which one you're carrying, because the next time pressure arrives, you will reach for the residue whether you understand it or not. The first species is identification. You begin to believe that what happened is you. You lost a contract, so you're a loser. You were yelled at by someone senior, so you're a small person. You got passed over for a role, so you're failing. The event that passed through you has now been moved inside you and given an identity lease. This is what the cognitive therapists call a core belief, a stable, identity-level conclusion drawn from a situational event. The second species is training. You begin to notice what the event demanded of you, and you install the demand as a capacity. You lost a contract, so you learned to negotiate retainers in the next batch of proposals. You were yelled at, so you built a quiet, fast reply policy. You got passed over, so you wrote for yourself, not for the room, the 20-line description of the kind of operator you're choosing to be next. Same event. Two completely different bureaucracies inside your head. Marcus Aurelius in Meditations wrote to himself repeatedly about this. He asked over and over, in slightly different forms, what kind of person he was choosing to be regardless of what happened around him. His environment changed. His enemies changed. His body changed. His commitment to a chosen character did not depend on the environment's behavior. He framed it as prohairesis, the inner choice, which was, he argued, the only fully filled territory left inside a life that was otherwise being handed around by an empire. The classical Stoic word for the second species was ascesis, a training discipline carried out by a person on themselves. It is the ancestor of the modern word ascetic, but in the original Stoic context, ascesis simply meant the practice you put yourself through on purpose so that the pressure you didn't put yourself through would not destroy you later. This is where the moral of every Stoic story you've heard was actually located, not in the calm part at the surface, not in the quote at the top of the page, but in the silent repetition of small disciplines during the quiet hours. So the operative question after a pressure event is not what happened to me, but what did this event install in me, and do I want to keep it? If you lost a contract and your conclusion is, I'm a bad businesswoman, you have installed identity from residue. If you lost a contract and your conclusion is, I'll never again depend on a single client for more than 30% of quarterly revenue, you have installed training from residue. Same pain, completely different ledger. This is the deepest of the four states. Most people do not fail to handle pressure in state 1. They fail to integrate pressure in state 4, and the unintegrated residue becomes the next state 3 difficulty, a short exercise. Tonight, after dinner, write down the most recent event you would call pressure. Beside it, write down 2 sentences. First, the conclusion I drew about myself. Second, the capacity I could have drawn instead. Keep the sheet for a month and reread it. You will see with your own handwriting which species of residue you have been installing most often. The Bill question: is Stoicism astrally the right tool here? You are halfway through this video and the natural objection is rising. Modern readers fairly ask whether all of this Stoic talk is just a clever rerouting of avoidance. Is the trained calm of the hold just comfortable suppression dressed up as virtue? Is the refusal to identify with pressure a way of refusing to feel pressure at the cost of denying someone real what they actually need? This is the question that the competitor's script never addressed, and it's the most important retention moment in the second half. So, let me address it directly. The Stoics made 3 distinctions that protect against this misuse, and they are worth keeping in your hands. The first distinction: pressure is not the same as suffering. You can be present under pressure without adding narrative weight to it. You cannot be present under suffering while pretending suffering doesn't exist. The Stoic position on pressure is presence. The Stoic position on actual tragic loss is grief, experienced, not turned off. The second distinction, discipline, is not the same as detachment. Discipline is the trained choice to do the work in front of you with full attention. Detachment is the trained refusal to engage with the work at all. Marcus Aurelius did not decline to be a father, a husband, an emperor, or a friend. He declined to be hijacked by the felt experience of being a father, a husband, an emperor, or a friend. The third distinction. Composure is not the same as suppression. Composure is the trained capacity to let strong feeling pass through you without becoming your entire architecture. Suppression is the refusal to allow the feeling in. The Stoic practice, like the modern psychological practice of emotional regulation as opposed to emotional control, permits the feeling. It declines the felt feeling's authority over your next action. There is also an honest limit worth naming. Stoicism as a personal practice is not a substitute for mental health care, structural generosity, or solidarity with other people. The emperor can train himself in a portable notebook on campaign. But the widow is not going to solve the loss of her husband by reading meditations, and the friend who refuses to call his dying friend is not going to be repaired by reminding himself of the dichotomy of control. The tools discussed here work for the manageable but heavy zone of pressure, not for the portion of human suffering that requires other human beings, professional help, or structural reform. Naming that limit isn't a critique of Stoicism. It's the difference between using the tool honestly and using the tool as a brand. This is also why the script slows down here. The first 3 states can be taught in any order, in fragments on a Sunday morning. The 4th state, the inheritance, only works if you've correctly identified what the tool actually is. Evidence and investigation. What modern practice tells use? Let's widen the view for a moment, because the Stoics are not alone in this territory. 3 contemporary research traditions converge on the same architecture. First, the attentional control theory developed by several labs including Misogyny, Mogg, and Bradley over the past 20 years. Their work demonstrates that under threat or load, attention narrows involuntarily toward the threatening stimulus and away from the wider field. The training they propose, and which the Stoics proposed 2,000 years earlier, is to interrupt that narrowing long enough for the broader field to come back online. The breath, the pause, the naming exercise, all 3 of these are attentional control operations described in different vocabularies. Second, the cognitive appraisal literature in emotion theory, which traces back to Magda Arnold and Richard Lazarus in the mid-20th century. The Stoic claim that the same event, depending on what your mind makes of it, can produce entirely different inner states, is essentially identical to the modern claim that an emotion follows the appraisal of an event more than the event itself. Third, the body of work on interoception and somatic regulation, including the contemporary interest in polyvagal theory and the older work on the somatic marker hypothesis. This body of literature confirms what the Stoics intuited, that the body's felt state is not a response to a thought, but a partial cause of the thought that comes next. To change the thought, you may need to change the body first. The breath is not a metaphor. It is a small mechanical intervention in the cortical amygdala loop that produces the felt experience of pressure in your chest. The Stoic practice, in plain words, is the joint product of these 3 traditions. The competitor's script works because the underlying mechanism is real and grounded in research. The competitor script also exhausts the listener because the underlying mechanism is described metaphorically and repeatedly instead of being developed as one deepening practice. The Ford levers, what you build across all Ford snates. Now the architecture. These are 4 capacities you install once and use across every pressure event for the rest of your life. They are inexpensive, they don't require gear, and they don't require anyone else's cooperation to practice. Lever 1, the breath. Train it 3 times a day for 60 seconds. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Theost is the ratio, longer out than in. Longer exhale than in, longer exhale than inhale activates the parasympathetic system reliably. After 60 days, you have a portable resource that costs nothing and provides a 1-second doorway between any stimulus and your next move. Lever 2, the name. Train it during ordinary moments. When your partner says something ambiguous at breakfast, name what you actually heard. When your boss sends a 1-sentence email, name the simplest factual reading. When your child says "fine" to your question, name that the conversation is incomplete. Naming ordinary moments is exercise. Naming extraordinary moments becomes second nature. Lever 3, the scope. Train it by picking one task a day, every day, and finishing it before you start the next one. This sounds unimpressive. It is the most expensive training you can install because it directly opposes the cognitive habit that drives most modern anxiety, the habit of carrying the entire future in the present moment. The Stoics called this the discipline of tu kath, auto, literally the thing itself. The modern translation, the task at hand for the time being complete. Lever 4, the inheritance choice. Train it by reviewing one event daily for 90 seconds. What happened, what I concluded, what I could have concluded instead. This is the slow lever. It produces new behavior over months, not over minutes. But it is the only lever that protects your state 4 from rotting. Each lever is approximately 1 minute a day of practice. Together, this is 4 minutes a day to install a system that will change how every major pressure event feels for the rest of your life. That is a very small entry price for a very large inner architecture. What? Eat millions now, an honest reading of the territory. Most people who try Stoic practice walk away from it within 6 weeks because they install it as ideology rather than capacity. They read meditations as if it were a self-help manual. They memorize phrases. They repeat them under pressure without the underlying practice. And when the phrases don't regulate the pressure, they abandon the practice. The Stoics themselves were not doing that. Meditations was a working notebook. Discourses were transcripts of teaching sessions. Letters were drafts of advice to a friend. None of these texts were intended to be sold in airport bookshops or rendered as 30-second video clips. The actual practice described in them looks more like a year of quiet training than a week of inspirational content. If you're going to install this seriously, you'll do better than reading the philosophy more times. You will practice the 4 levers for 90 days. You will read 2 primary sources, Enchiridion by Epictetus and Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, in full, slowly taking down marginalia. You will find one friend with whom you can speak honestly about what your state 4 residue has been doing. You will not bother with Stoicism-themed merchandise, which is mostly a marketing category. If you only ever read the philosophy without installing the practice, the philosophy will read as beautiful and will not change your week. If you install the practice without reading the philosophy, the practice will hold you, but only for the time your body can hold it. The combination, sustained across years, is what produces a person who appears externally calm, not because they are suppressing, but because at the level of habit, their nervous system is genuinely trained. Here is what the cycle has given you. It has given you state 1, the knock and the trained response that does not need to be improvised each time. It has given you state 2, the loop, and the small executable sentence that knows how to take the future apart from the present. It has given you state 3, the hold and the post-loop position from which you can actually act without becoming the act. It has given you state 4, the inheritance, and the daily review that decides what gets installed in your architecture. It has given you 4 levers, the breath, the name, the scope, the inheritance choice, that you build across all 4 states and use for the rest of your life. Put together, this is not a philosophy that promises you won't be pressed. It promises the opposite, that you will be pressed and that the pressure will not own the inside of your skull. The night Dara ended the call after she had interrupted her own loop twice and written the same 3-line piece of paper 3 times in the kitchen. She sat for a minute on the floor with her back against the door. She did not decide not to feel the pressure. She decided when the next working hour would begin. The next working hour was the next morning at 9:47, the same minute the call had come in. She was not going to rebuild her entire quarter by then. She was going to send 3 thank you notes for work she had previously done for clients who had paid her, to ask whether any of them had a small piece of work they needed by the end of the month. She did not fix everything that morning. She moved. That is the entire practice, not a year of calm, not the absence of pressure, not a romantic crystallization of your character into a public symbol of virtue. Just the next working minute, attended to with the full attention that minute is prepared to receive. Pressure will arrive again. It will arrive in an unimproved form, in unrelated contexts, on days you have not planned for it. The 4 states will run their course. The 4 levers will be there if you have trained them. The bookkeeping you did in State 4 last Tuesday is the resource that allows State 3 next Wednesday to land without demolishing your whole week. If you take anything from this, take the 4 minutes a day. The breath, the name, the scope, the inheritance choice. Install them for 90 days. The classical Stoics did not promise you a world without pressure. They promised you a mind under pressure that does not collapse. That is the bargain. The architects of this practice, working in a currency of attention rather than a currency of income, decided that the inner architecture was worth the 30 years it took them to build, and that it would stay built long after the empire had fallen out from under them. They were right. The empires did fall out. The attention stays human. You don't need the world to be quiet. You need 4 minutes a day for 90 days. Start tonight.